see your name. Do you see my name? Because I put it in there. Do you see it or no?
You are registered as Pastor G. Pastor G is here.
Got it.
I just want to welcome the podcast. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. Greetings, everybody. This is the Share the Road podcast. This is your host, Chazz Guerra-Ogiste. This is a special podcast that I've been wanting to do for a long time. I want to be able to get this get to this audience, to your audience, to my audience, to our audience, just to share our roads. And I want to be able to share the road of not only myself, but whoever I'm going to be interviewing. And so today I have none other than Pastor G, also known as Cyril Guerra. He's known me my entire life, so this is going to be a really interesting interview. Not only has he known me his entire life, he's worked not only as a pastor, a youth pastor, but an executive pastor at Hopewell Baptist Church. He does amazing work in the community. He now works as the director of human resources down in Pompano Beach, and he's educated. Went to Babson College, and what was your divinity at? His divinity is at Liberty University, and so I want to welcome and show my appreciation to Pastor G, also known as Uncle Junior.
What's good, man? You doing all right?
Doing well.
Good.
How's things going with you?
Man, listen, I am on a podcast with you. I've arrived, man. I have arrived.
Yeah. It feels like a good moment, really. And so just in the name and everything that I spoke about before, can you just tell me a little bit about your first introduction to prayer?
So interestingly enough, that introduction came through my grandfather and your great-grandfather. He would visit from Trinidad maybe every other year, and he would spend months staying with us. We didn't have a whole lot of room. So, my sister had a room, your mother, I had a room. And so your great-grandfather, when he came up from Trinidad, he would stay in the room with me. And he was a praying man. It's hilarious because he would get up before the sun rises. He'd be on his knees and he'd audibly be praying nice and loud while I'm still trying to get some rest. So back then I'm like, man, I just wish he would just shut up.
You're saying like 3 a.m., 4 a.m.? How early was he up?
It would probably be closer to maybe about 4:45, 5 a.m. That he'd be up. He didn't sleep much. Being older. And it was through listening to him that I got an understanding of how you pray and what you pray for. I mean, this man prayed for everything under the sun. He prayed for, his children and grandchildren and, what was happening in the world. And so just listening to him, that had a tremendous impact on me.
Awesome. That's really awesome to hear. I don't think I've ever really heard of my great grandfather from that perspective, honestly, and so that's really good to hear. And so from there, what do you feel like is your application of prayer? Do you feel like it's changed? How do you pray now, or what have you learned since those years from learning from our our lineage and from your experience?
So when you talk about application, I understand that although I was introduced through audible prayer, being able to hear somebody pray, I've always been a pretty private individual. And so I always prayed, but rarely did it out loud. I think one of the things that I've learned over time is it's important to do both. It's important to have your own personal prayer time, but it's also really important to pray for others, because you would be shocked at how it makes people feel when they actually hear you praying for them. The most recent time I actually talked about in the podcast, I ran into some folks in what appeared to be a random way, and they were dealing with a situation, and right then and there hopped in, said a word of prayer with them, obviously followed up with them to see how things are going, etc. Tried to provide some support to them, physical support to them. But it just changed how they felt. And I find that it's really rare that I pray audibly for somebody and with somebody, and they walk away feeling exactly the way they did when I met them.
And I actually want to, you mentioned a couple of different things that I want to talk about. You mentioned being a private person, but you also talked about how you publicly pray and how you publicly pray for people on the spot.
Mhm.
And I kind of want to hear a little bit more about like what inspired you to do things like that. Because when people, and especially in my generation, say they hear some bad news, or say somebody posts about somebody dying in their life, or somebody is just going through a hard time, they'd be like, I'm praying for you, or prayers out to you. And it's kind of just, it just kind of just stays at that one sentence. So what made you, or what inspired you to pray in that way, or who showed you to pray in that way?
I don't know that anybody showed me how to do it. It's about connecting with people. You can tell somebody what you're going to do for them, but it's a little different when you take the time and you stop whatever you're doing and you engage in an exchange with them. People never forget that. You know, I can say, they're there, it'll be all right, I'll keep you lifted in prayer. And okay, but to actually petition God on their behalf, because you care about them, you may not even really know them that well, but just because they're a human being, you care about them, makes a huge difference, in my opinion. And I'm about connecting with people. It's something that I've grown into because, again, I'm kind of a personal dude. I mind my business, etc. And so for that reason, it's difficult. All right, looks like we lost Coach Chazz. Hopefully he'll dial back in. So just hold tight, folks, while we wait for Coach Chazz to come back in.
Actually, I do want to talk about what you do in the podcast, and you did mention Triflin One's podcast. I do want to highlight it. Can you talk about what went into those first podcasts? Because you're not really of the generation to be like, oh, I gotta do a podcast. It's like, it's not calling you old up, but right? Like the podcasting game is a little younger, and
right,
you have a great potential and you have a great word that you're putting out. And so I want to hear about what made you start the podcast and what went into those first couple episodes.
What made me start the podcast? This ambitious, sometimes even annoying young man who basically said, Unc, I think that you need to start a podcast. I think you have something to say. So if you all haven't figured that out yet, that's Coach Chazz that I'm talking to. Right. So about 2.5 years ago, I was in Boston. We were having breakfast, and you said, you were telling me about what you were doing with the podcast. I was asking questions, and then that's when you shifted the focus onto me. And I wasn't having it. I wasn't hearing it. I was like, yeah, that ain't my thing, bruh. And I thought about it a little bit, but then I said again, that's not my thing. Fast forward to you being in Florida, and I had resigned from the church that I was at for over 20 years. And you happened to be visiting, and you stopped by, and I shared with you that I'd resigned. And then you brought it up again. You said, oh man, well, you really got to start the podcast now. But that time it stuck with me. That time I thought about it and I said, let me look into this. Let me research it. From that point, I had to make a determination. Well, who do I want to reach? Who do I want to speak to with this? One of the things that I recognized, I've worked, I spent 10 years as a youth pastor and 6.5 years as an executive minister. And in that role, the young people, the young adults, often I interacted with them. So I taught young adult Bible study, things like that. And so I've always had an affinity for young people. And I've got eyes in my head. I look around in many churches and I see that the church is hemorrhaging young people. And so as I thought about it, I said, I want to provide something that is going to resonate with young people. Although I may not be in that particular age group, I've always been able to identify with their needs, and I listen to them. So I spent a lot of time just talking to young people. What are you dealing with? What is it that you're looking for? Where are you as it relates to your faith walk? So I did a lot of, I guess you could say, market research with young people, young adults. In fact, when I had done the first pit. So it was kind of loud, and I was hitting it really fast. And without fail, everyone said, we love hearing you in the pulpit, but from a podcast standpoint, we don't want to hear it like that. The message they said was solid,
Mm-hmm.
but would like it to be more conversational. Like, we're having a conversation. As a matter of fact, my sister-in-law, she's young. She's under 40. And she said she wants it to be like we're sitting at the fireside and she's listening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that meant that I had to completely change my presentation style. So a lot of that went into the very beginning of this. And that's not even talking about just the technical stuff, figuring out, that I was going to go through a Buzzsprout to distribute it, and, how was I going to record it and get microphones and that stuff. So it was a really steep learning curve for me initially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that's I think with podcasting, that's what we recognize. We're like, all right, how do we get to our audience? What's the feel that we want to have? I recognize that a lot of the podcasts that I was listening to, I was listening to in my car, and so when I was thinking about how I want to deliver, I wanted to be like, all right, you walk into the car, you can play it, and it's something that you can even like what we were discussing, something you can listen to on a car ride, something you can listen to on your couch, something where it feels like you're with a friend or you're just sitting down. I think that's really a big benefit of the podcast, the podcasting platform, or even like TikTok too, because this is a place where people are able to connect, whether it's through lives, whether it's through just scrolling really quick. You'll get 1 to 3 minutes of somebody's life, and you can get either that face to face or it's right to the ear, right to what you're hearing, and you get to choose it too.
Absolutely.
It's not like with some other platforms like Facebook or YouTube, you get a lot of random stuff or stuff suggested to you in different ways based on algorithms. But with podcasting, with podcasting especially, that's definitely just basically on you. And so, kind of with, I think you've already talked about it, but are there any lessons or anything that you feel like you've learned through doing the Triflin One's podcast?
Consistency, man. Consistency. So when I launched, I told folks that I was going to launch every Wednesday. Well, Wednesday, that's a 24-hour period, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm like, okay, as long as I get that thing out on Wednesday, I've stood by what I had to say. And so I started dropping pretty much overnight on Tuesdays. And so when people woke up on Wednesday morning, they'd be able to tune in. And one day I had a really rough week, man. It was a rough week. And so I don't think I uploaded until about 7 a.m. And I had a dude reach out to me and be like, yo, like, what are you doing? Like, I listened to this on my way to work. Like, how could you can't be dropping this at 7 a.m. And in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, dude, I said Wednesday. This is Wednesday. But what I learned is that, first of all, people actually listen. Mm-hmm. So that was a great thing to be checked by a listener to say, I have a routine. My routine is when I get up on Wednesdays and I get up pretty early, like by 5 a.m., the Triflin One's episode needs to be up there so I can listen to it. Mm-hmm. And so I realized that consistency is so important. I'm coming up on almost a year now.
Yeah.
And so I'll be celebrating my 1-year anniversary. And I've learned you've got to stick with it. There are weeks where I don't get as many, listeners or downloads or what have you as I would like. But the bottom line is I have a consistent base of people who are listening, a consistent base of people who are telling me they enjoy it. And so a part of it now is I'm not just doing something like this is legit ministry, mm-hmm. and people want to hear it, and you need to provide what the people want.
Exactly. That's something that I've definitely learned, because when you're late or when certain people, you're part of their schedule now, basically. It's kind of, mm-hmm. it is your ministry now. And people have the benefit of listening to you. They can binge all your lessons at once, but that's not really the way, kind of like how we digest the Triflin One's podcast. It's, you get, you're sipping during the day, you be able to meditate on it through the week. And it's actually great because you end us off with a prayer when we leave. And so, actually, I want to talk about that a little bit. What made you decide to pray for your audience before you ended the podcast? Because that's not something that every podcaster does, and that's very unique to your style. So, what made you want to do that?
After presenting a particular topic, if that person resonates with that message, if I'm dealing with depression or mental health, if I'm dealing with the loss of a loved one, whatever it is that I deal with on that particular day, if it resonates with somebody, I think that to pray about that particular thing for the listeners is helpful, because it's an extra, somebody who has a dysfunctional family. I dealt with that topic. So they're listening to this and they're like, yeah, that's me. That's what I'm dealing with. So then to pray about their family and the dysfunction that they're dealing with in that family, I think it's important. And I think it makes a difference.
Yeah.
Now, I could be wrong. Nobody's told me, bro, you can cut the prayer. I haven't heard that at all. People have basically said they like it, in the format that it's in.
That definitely holds up. And so I want to bring it. So we're going to do some moving around with this conversation. And so this kind of goes into the last part of what we was talking about. But do you feel there are 2 or 3 questions that people ask you often in your life?
I think the number one question I get is, why is it that when I'm trying to do the right thing, life seems to fall apart? Or when I'm trying to do the right thing, temptation comes along and pulls me off my path. I think I get that more than anything else. The other question I often get are for those who are struggling with what they see around them. And so they're asking, how are you able to maintain your faith in the midst of all the negativity that you see? How are you able to continue to even operate in a place of calm? Because most people look to me for calm.
Yep.
How are you able to do that when everything is going on? And so those are two of the questions that I get, all the time, because they observe me. They see me operate in situations that can be high stress or full of drama. And it doesn't really move me. The blessing for me, as you mentioned, I'm in human resources. I'm in human resources, for about a little bit under 200 employees. So there are lots of different personalities. There's lots of drama that takes place, et cetera. And so I'm faced with many different types of issues, and conflict resolution is an important part of that. So my faith plays a role in that, because it keeps me from being moved from an emotional standpoint. It gives me perspective to be able to deal with those that nobody else wants to deal with because they're a difficult personality, et cetera. So all of this allows me to approach things differently, if that makes any sense at all.
It definitely does make sense. You talked about a lot of I want to bring it actually to what my apologies, because it's like you talk about people come to you for a calm, that they recognize that there's like an aptitude about you that people can recognize and they want to emulate in a way. And so I want to ask, how much do you feel like of your personality comes from your upbringing? How much do you feel like it comes from your family? And what do you think about that? Where do you think you get those qualities?
All of the above, man. All of the above. So overall, I think our family, we're laid back. We're not high strung. We're not overly emotional. We're pretty calm. So I think a lot of that plays into who I am and what my personality is like. We don't excite easily. When something pops off, like we analyze, we think about that thing, and then we make our move. So I think when I look at, your grandfather, my father, your mother, my sister, my mother, your grandmother, we're pretty even in our personalities. Coming from the Roxbury section of Boston, Massachusetts, I think that also played a role in my personality, because it taught me how to be aware of my surroundings. It taught me how to be cautiously optimistic. Yeah. So when I meet people, I'm not all in when I meet folks. I'm not rude anymore. Back in the day, somebody tried to talk to me and I didn't know them, I'd kind of be looking at them like, yo, do I know you? And why are you talking to me? So I've grown past that. But I think the environment that I grew up in, it taught me to pay attention to what's going on around me. It taught me to use wisdom as I'm dealing with people. It taught me even to just be cautious about, where I park my vehicle and making sure the doors are locked and things like that. So it's my personality is one that's cautious in a lot of ways, observant in a lot of ways, and even from a personality and emotional standpoint. So I would say that they're both intertwined, both my family and the environment that I came up in.
So there's difference points. You had mentioned Roxbury, and there's like right now you're actually in Florida, in South Florida. I don't want to give no exact directions, but you spent some time in the South. This isn't your first state in the South, and so I kind of want to hear a little bit. Do you feel like moving down south has changed you at all? Do you feel like the pace has changed you at all? What do you feel like?
Absolutely.
What do you feel
Absolutely,
like
man.
Is like the contrast between like your Atlanta and South Florida versus Boston?
I think things are a little less high strung down south than they are up north. Like, for example, man, I do not like driving in Boston anymore. Yeah. I just don't. The light changes and it's like they're all over there. They're all over their horn, and it hasn't even been like a millisecond yet. It's not quite that bad down here. I found that the people, tend to be friendlier down south than they are up north. When you get to know somebody up north, they're just as cool as they are anywhere else. But it's just people just move different.
They don't want that first impression.
Yeah. Right. So people just move a little different. I don't know if things have changed at all, but when I was up north, you would see somebody and you look at them and you might nod a little bit, just like, yeah, I see you, and keep it moving. Whereas down here, people would be like, good morning, or good afternoon. And so I had to adapt to that. I had to change. And a part of that really I have to attribute to my wife. My wife is a Georgia peach. And so, being from Macon, Georgia, like everybody, like there are no strangers. Everywhere you go, you meet people. So I'm continuing to evolve because, even now I'm much better than I used to be. Like we would go on a cruise and people would be sitting at, you have to share tables with people at the cruise. And so my wife is talking to everybody and I'm looking at everybody like, no, I don't care what you do. I ain't finna tell you what I do. Yep. And I don't care how many kids you got. I'm not telling you how many I got. I'm just kind of sitting there like that. Nice. Whereas now I understand the benefit of getting to know people because you just never know who you're going to meet, what they do, where they're at. And that's a lesson that I've learned just being in a different environment. I think that being outside of the area that I grew up in gave me the opportunity to grow. I don't know that I would have grown as much as I have if I had stayed in Boston. And that's not to be disparaging of Boston. I just think that that's the case with everybody. If you grow up in a place and you're always there, I don't think that you ever get the benefit of experiencing other people, other things, etc., and expanding who you are.
No, I definitely agree. I know when I spent time traveling, whether it was in that first, actually with you, the first trip when I was 16, my first solo trip down to West Palm, where I got to spend some time away from my mom, away from my dad, just spent some time training and got to see you, got to chill with the bros, got to see that friendship and how it was working and how you can literally meet anybody. I think that was the first instance as to where I recognize you can meet a friend anywhere. Where I remember this moment where you probably remember we was in City Place, you was driving and we saw a yellow Hummer, and when we saw the yellow Hummer, we I don't know if you saw the Omega plates, but either you or him saw him first, and I think you barked first, and you barked. Dude pulled over within 5 feet. You pulled over. Y'all was chopping it up for like 15 minutes, leaving me and me and Jordan in the back, and my cousin in the back, and we're like, "What's going on?" and and you would have swore y'all was lifetime friends, but afterward you told us that
Right.
you had never met him before, and so that was one of
Correct.
those moments
Correct.
where I recognize not only Southern hospitality, but friendship is essential to the soul. Um, and so
Absolutely.
I think we're
And I don't remember that situation, to be quite honest with you. But to put to your
Mhm.
point, becoming a man of Omega Psi Phi also, I think, caused me to expand as
Mhm.
well, because I realized that whenever I travel, whenever I'm traveling, I want to find out who's in that particular city so I can meet and expand and build and grow and receive and give. And so I think just all my experiences together have come to a place where it's made me who I
Mhm.
am.
And since we're on the topic
Yeah.
of Omega Psi Phi, we might as well get into it. Do you feel like there are any bras or any chapters, locations that have like shifted your perspective, either as a man of Omega, like just any places, people, or chapters you've seen?
I think that every time I meet somebody and every time I'm introduced to a different chapter, I gain new
Mm.
perspective. That's just real. Um, I remember going up to Macon, Georgia, and running into some bros there, and just hanging out with them. And you gain a different perspective. You learn new things. You experience new people. I even remember going, being out the bros one night. This was some years ago, and then going to the movies the following night. And one of the bros that I had just met the night before was a police officer. So he was on detail at the movie theater I was at. I had taken my daughter to the movies up there, and he came and grabbed me out of the movie theater because there was another brother from Fort Valley
Mm.
State that he wanted me to meet. And so there's just this continuous building that takes place. So I can't say that there's any particular thing that stands out, but every single time I travel, every time I come into contact with somebody, I'm learning something new, and I'm becoming better as a result
Mm-hmm.
of it.
Every
And I hope that they're becoming better as well.
100%, especially with just it's more so about the intention that you bring to the bros, or the intention. That's with any fraternity, with your life, with
Mhm.
what you do. It's like what's the intention that you want to bring to this friendship, to your frat, to your chapter. And so, I mean, recognizing for that from you, I was able to emulate that example. And so I hope I'm doing the same with bros that I meet, and even just with sharing this podcast too. It's like we want to be good. We want to be in service to help other people. And so that's a really good just thing to have, especially just being open and being willing for those friendships to be forged and to build those bridges and make them stronger through the years. Um, I really like that. Kind of want to shift away from the frat and go into just things for the future for you. And so, are there any like
Okay.
locations or any places that you feel that you haven't went before that are calling your name? Locations that you haven't been that you feel are like calling you.
So you're talking about physical locations, like places in the world, or are you talking about locations in terms of destinations as it relates to goals and things that I want to accomplish? Which one are you
We can
referring
do
to?
both. Well, I was talking about physical, but we can go into the meta if you want to after.
Okay. So physically, I think physical locations that I'd like to go to, I love
Mm-hmm.
history, man. And so one of the things that has always been at the top of the list, but don't tell nobody, I'm scared, is not the motherland, the Holy
Mm-hmm.
Land. Um, because I love the thought of being in an environment where I'm able to read about all this stuff that takes place biblically and then be able to
Yeah.
observe it. Now, I went to the motherland back in 2013 to South Africa, and it was the absolute best experience that I've ever had. But I'd like to go to another area of Africa, maybe to
Mm-hmm.
Ghana, another area, because South Africa has had a heavily European
Yep.
influence on it.
Sure have.
And so as a result, I would like to maybe go to the West Coast or I would love to also do Egypt, Northern Africa, etc. So those are the places that are at the top of my bucket list. And I had said that I would get past my, there are things that are always happening in the Holy Land. Folks are always bombing and stuff like that. But then there are plenty of folks who've gone and, have come back in one piece. And so I've got to get past my fear, just like with everything else, to be able to do that. I am next year going on the Alaska cruise. So I'm looking forward to that, just kicking back and relaxing with family and friends.
What made you choose Alaska?
What's that? So there were actually some bros were going, and with their wives, significant others, etc. And they had mentioned it to your aunt, my wife, and she said, "Would you like to do this?" And I said, "Yeah, that actually, because with a cruise, you don't have to do all that driving and all the rest of that. You kind of just." So it's a 10-day cruise. I've heard lots of really positive things about the Alaska cruise, and so I'm looking forward to it, man. Just from a relaxation standpoint.
Yeah. No, Alaska sounds fun. I've heard some good things about Alaska, just the views and how different it is. So 10 days sounds like a lot, though. I've never heard of a 10-day cruise.
Listen, man, I need all 10 of them days, and I could actually use another 4 more.
You definitely deserve it. I'm not gonna lie. If anybody doesn't, shoot.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Where do you feel like it? What do you feel like is your passion? Do you feel like you have a certain passion, or have you found your passion? Do you feel like?
So coming from an introvert, because I am an introvert, a lot of people are shocked when I tell them that, but I am an introvert by nature. So I'm good with being all by myself. But if I have too much of that too, I think I start to wither. My passion is people. My passion is impact on people. And more specifically, my passion is impact on people from a spiritual standpoint. There are so many people that are out there that are hurting. There are people who are kind of the forgotten, that no one really pays attention to. There are folks who do things and live a certain way because they've made bad decisions, or because that's all they've ever been exposed to. And so I think it's important to not forget about those folks. I found that there are people who have really bad attitudes, who are in bad situations, etc. And when somebody shows them some love and some understanding, some patience, then they move a little bit different sometimes. There are folks who are going to always do what they've always done, because there's just a certain contingency within society that's going to do that. But then there are others who I've seen real change in them just because somebody attempted to understand them. So my passion is people and impact as it relates to people. And that's why, from a fraternal standpoint, the community service that's done, from a, interacting with a wide range of people, even going back to the podcast, I'm not making money from the podcast. I'm not, there's no monetization that's taking place, and I've been doing this a year. But there are people who reach out to me, somebody that your age group reached out to me out to Clear Blue Sky one day and was like, "Listen, man, your podcast is hitting. I've been dealing with some mental health stuff, and it spoke to me." That's what this thing is about. If I get one of those calls every now and again, it reminds me that my passion, that I'm operating in my passion.
Yeah, sometimes you need that confirmation that's, it might not come every single time, but when you get those, it trickles and it happens, and people do receive that, especially when you're consistent. People will consistently come to you, be like, you're actually doing that good work. And, I appreciate the podcast. I was listening to the podcast even when I was on vacation. And so we're definitely,
got you. I appreciate that.
We're both doing some good work, definitely doing some good work. Do you feel like there's anything that you, not in relation to the podcast, but it could be in relation to the podcast. Is there anything that you do consistently, every night, every day, every morning?
Pray.
Right.
Pray. Um, Pray. The other thing, and the negative side is the other thing is I think a lot. So, I pray, but then I have difficulty shutting my mind down. And that happens every morning and every night as well. So certainly spending time with God to petition him and ask him about the things that I need and others need, but also making sure that I thank him and show my gratitude for all the things that he's doing and for who he is. But then my other routine is in the morning, usually thinking about all the things that have to be done. And in the evening, debriefing from everything that has happened during that day, and also thinking about everything that has to be done. So those are the two consistent things that I think happen on a daily basis with me: prayer, but also my mind is rolling about the many things that require attention and time and resources and all that other stuff.
I mean, it's not easy being a black man in America, especially when you choose to have the responsibility that you have. And we talk about it off camera. You're
Right,
very
right,
hardworking man. And even this 10-day Alaska trip, you're gonna definitely deserve 100%. So like,
yes sir, yes sir, yes sir.
any of that time, I definitely be glad. Any time off that you have, especially when you come up north, I definitely am glad to see you just pass out and relax. So
yeah, I got to make it back up there again soon, because I don't think I've been up there.
It's been a while.
I think it's been actually might even be coming up on the close to 2-year mark since I've been up there. So I do need to make it back up there pretty soon.
Before the snow does, because you won't want after that. I had a couple more questions. I was going to ask you, what is a practice? Like a final 2 questions, and I think I know the answer. What do you feel like as a practice that everyone, if you could tell everybody in the world with a loudspeaker, what is a message that you feel like everybody should do, everybody should think about, or do every day?
I'm going to say, consider your fellow human beings. And the reason why I say that is because, I could say, pray, read your Bible, say all those things. The one thing I believe that this world is sincerely missing right now is the ability to actually love other people as human beings, to be able to disagree with people and respect other people. The world that we live in, the world of social media, etc. Everyone has an opinion about somebody else's life. Everyone is dragging folks for the things that they do. You can't operate without having multiple trolls who are trying to get a laugh out of other people, or who are just contrarian for no reason whatsoever. They just, whatever, if you say the sky is blue, they're going to say, well, the sky is actually green, and I'm going to tell you how it is. I think that so much energy is placed in all of that, that we forget that there are other people on the other side of the camera, on the other side of the keyboard, etc. And so we've become less humane. We've become less respectful. So if there was a message that I could communicate to everybody, is be considerate, be respectful, operate from a place of love. And clearly there are people in this world who are trifling, hence the Triflin Ones. So you're going to come across folks who are not nice, and who are going to try you, etc. And that's okay. My policy is, I back away from those types of individuals. I peep you, I see you, I see how you get down, I see how you move. Well, I just don't do you, but I'm not going to spend my time and my energy trying to then malign you or treat you XYZ or be petty with you. Like, I don't have that kind of time, you know. So I think that the world is missing respect, being considerate, and love.
No, I can definitely agree on that one, especially in a world where everybody's trying to go viral. They see the world where the celebrities they're trying to get a hit. They're trying to get that spark. Everyone wants that spark, and they're trying to do whatever they can to get to it. And it's
Right.
unfortunate that we have this world where the negativity will always spread faster than the positivity, and that's for it's for reasons. It's for survival. It's what we as humans do. We're looking for the bad so that we can survive, but in a less
Yeah.
jungle-fied world, or however we say it, in a less dangerous world, we're not fighting these predators. We're fighting each other now, and so it does take love. It does take patience. It takes being considerate of the next person. And so even with this podcast, the goal is to humanize other people. That we're not just podcasters. We're not just voices on the camera. We're people. We're we're family. And so like there's more to what meets the eye. There's more to what's in between this screen. My final question for you is, what do you want your legacy to be?
That he was a good guy, that he cared about people. Not perfect, didn't always agree with him, but he was all right. Like he was all right. When my name comes up, I often talk about and think about when I've gone on, when I've left this earth. If people would just simply say, Cyril, he was all right. And if they can reminisce and if they can pinpoint a particular time when I did or said something that was impactful to them, I've done my piece. I was a good husband, a good father, a good uncle, a good fraternity brother, a good minister, that in every walk of life, everything that I did, I was a good HR director, that everywhere I went and everything that I did, people say he did it with 100% of who he was. And every person that I came into contact with, I left in a better position or in a better state than when I met them.
That's a really good place to leave off at, honestly. And I really want to thank you, Uncle Junior. Pastor G, Cyril Guerra, for doing this podcast with me. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with? Anything you want to tell the people before we head out?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to you for allowing me to be on your podcast. I appreciate it, because one of the things that I recognize is that while you are, 20 plus years my junior, you are Coach Chazz, and a good coach inspires others or pulls things out of others. And you've done that for me, number one. Number two, I would ask that, anyone who is interested, that they tune in to the Triflin Ones at least once. It is a less than 15-minute podcast. It is an inspirational message. It is real. It is relevant. It is non-judgmental. It is geared towards making sure that people are connected to God, even in the midst of them not necessarily going to a particular church or what have you. So for those who know God, love God, want to grow and develop in their relationship with God, then that's what the podcast is for. And so give it a whirl, listen to it. You can find it at www.triflin, TriflinOnes.com, triflinones.com. Or you can go to any podcast platform, where it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Pandora, anywhere you can find podcasts, you can find the Triflin Ones podcast. And I believe that if you do that, if you listen to it, I think you're going to want to listen to it again. And then I think if you want to listen to it again, you're going to want to share it with others. And so I appreciate you, Coach Chazz. Love you, and there's nothing that you can do about it.
Thank you once again. Check out the Triflin Ones podcast. Definitely one of the podcasts that I listen to on the weekly. Once again, appreciate you for coming out This isn't going to be the only segment that we do. I hope you know. So I hope you're ready for a part 2 in the future, maybe a part 3.
And just so you know, I'm going to be transitioning into doing video podcasting as well. And so we're going to absolutely have Coach Chazz on the Triflin One's video podcast as soon as the brother gets that thing set up. So we're gonna reciprocate this thing, man.
Working with it now. All right, awesome. Thanks again, everybody. This is the Share the Road podcast. We share my community, your community, our community with each other, and we just learn about how we got here. So thanks again, everybody. Peace.